Welcome to today's study session. Today we're going to be going over Windows Firewall and how to configure inbound and outbound rules. We're going to talk a little bit about the firewall itself, its properties, and how to work with the firewall. So for the Security Plus exam, you're going to need to know the basics of a firewall. And Windows Firewall that ships with most Windows devices is a pretty respectable firewall. It has a lot of basic functionality, but it's not foolproof, but it works pretty well. So I'm going to show you how you can configure your firewall if you have a Windows device, or how you can configure Windows Firewall, because this is a firewall that's readily available to most people, at least if you have a Windows operating system. With Windows 10, Windows Firewall will come standard, and it comes standard with many devices. So here's the interface itself. When you open up Windows Defender Firewall, you have just a basic functionality here. You have a file, action, view, and help. And these are just shortcuts in a drop-down format for some of the tools that we're going to be using in here. When you click inbound rules, you're listed with your inbound rules, and these are rules that govern inbound connections coming into your computer. Outbound rules are listed in the outbound rules tab, and these are rules governing what your computer can connect to. So two different types of rules, and we're going to go through each one. Now you're going to see probably within each of these a list of the programs on your computer, and what happens whenever you install a program. If that program needs access to the internet during installation, it's going to ask you for permission to access the internet or access whatever network resources it needs to. And once it does that, a rule will automatically be created within Windows Defender Firewall. So that's why you're going to see all these rules created already that you probably have never even thought about before if you've never looked at the firewall. So I want to set up an example here how we can use Windows Defender Firewall in a practical sense. Well, right now I'm using Firefox as my browser, and say I only want to restrict my users to using a certain type of browser, like Firefox. Maybe I don't want to use Google Chrome because I think it uses up too much RAM. Or maybe there's a security vulnerability within Internet Explorer, and I want to avoid that on my network, so I want to restrict the use of Internet Explorer entirely without having to uninstall Internet Explorer from every device. So if I have a firewall, like Windows Defender Firewall, I can create a rule to enable that. So let's go through that process. So we're going to create an inbound and outbound rule. We're going to start by clicking this button. We've clicked new rule, and you can also, instead of just clicking here to new rule, you can go to file, action and new rule. It does the same thing. It's just a shortcut to show you some of the differentiation. We're going to pick a program, and what we're going to do is we're going to restrict access to Google Chrome. Now let me pull up Google Chrome window to start, and we see that Google Chrome's working, is connected to the internet. Okay, so let me go ahead and just minimize that Chrome tab for a second, and then we're going to go ahead and create our rule based on that program. So we're going to select program for the type of rule. We're going to restrict access to a program. I'm going to hit next. Then you're going to browse, you navigate to where you find your program. So on my machine, it's found on Program Files 86, and then Google, and then Chrome. So when I click in here, I find the Chrome icon that you would actually use to execute Chrome, or start the program, and I'm going to select that icon itself. That's going to be the file path for the program. Now I'm going to block the connection with the type of rule. So what's the action we're going to take with this program? We're going to block the connection. And you have different types of profiles, which you don't need to get into just yet, but we're going to select all the profiles for this rule. And I'm going to name this rule Chrome block. Finish. If we want to do the same thing with an outbound rule, you see the rule is listed at the top there, Chrome block, and you can right click on that rule to look at the properties, and you'll look at a properties tab here. And it'll show you basically what we just set up, but in a properties submenu. So we'll do the same thing with the outbound rule for Google Chrome. Select program, hit next, browse. It'll save our file location, block the connection for all profiles, and we name the same thing Chrome block. Okay, now when we open up Google Chrome, and we try and search for something, we get this error message. This site cannot be reached. And that's because Google Chrome's attempting to access the internet, but we've blocked access using our firewall, so it can't. No matter how many times I refresh the page, it just won't work. It'll still show up the home page, because this is just part of the interface when you connect to Google Chrome. But if I search for anything, it's not going to find anything, because it can't access the internet. Now, if we want to disable that rule without deleting it, say we want to use that rule in the future, we can just click on the rule, and then we get a list of actions over here, one of them being disable rule. So if we disable the rule, the icon for it has disappeared. You see how the icon is a circle with a line through it? That means it's a deny rule. So we can just disable rule, and then we go back to Google Chrome, and we search for something, and here we go. Google Chrome's working again. And that's just because we're controlling access not through Chrome itself, but through the firewall. Now we talk about in the course stateful and stateless firewalls. Windows Defender Firewall is a stateful firewall. It keeps track of connection states, and it's able to determine the connection status based on those states. And I got a question from the chat. Would that block chrome.exe regardless of the application when you create the rule? And that's yes. That's going to block Chrome no matter, for all instances, no matter where that application was. So if you just have to select the correct file location for the installed program, basically. And we can do the same thing for Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer or Firefox. So when I create this rule, I just create a new rule, and I select program and next, and I look for the file location. You're disabling everything for this file. So you're choosing the file location where that file is installed. Okay, and it takes a little bit of knowledge to know where your files are going to be installed, so you can block the right program. But once you block that program, it's done. Now, no matter how many shortcuts, I'm accessing Chrome through my quick launch toolbar at the bottom of my screen. Even when I do that, that's all just a shortcut to this installation file, Google /Chrome, this file location. C program files, x86. Hold on, you don't see this. It's all a shortcut for this file location here. Program files times A6, Google Chrome application. That's just where Chrome is installed on this device. So you do have to select where Chrome is installed. No problem, Mike. Thanks for the question. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. So we've gone over now how to create one rule, and we're going to go over now some of the other functionality within the firewall itself. Let's talk about, instead of just doing a program, we could even do IP addresses or a range of IP addresses. So let's take a look at how we can do that. I'm going to pull up the command prompt, okay? And with our command prompt, we're going to ping a website, okay? Now we're going to use the ping command. We go through that, of course, with the course. And let's just ping a website. Darkreading.com. And type ping space www.darkreading.com. Now we use the ping command, we're going to get back an IP address for darkreading.com. We got this 104.17.117.99. So say we don't want our users to access a certain website. Well, we can block the IP addresses for those websites. So we're going to keep this in mind here, okay? And we're going to create a rule for that IP address. So let's go into our Windows Defender Firewall, and we're going to create a rule for this. So we're going to block here a, let's see. Let's do a custom rule, okay? And we're going to select, we're going to say all programs. And here we're going to select a port. You can select ports and protocol numbers. And we're going to say the scope here as these IP addresses. We're going to select remote IP addresses because we're connecting to a site on the internet. So we're going to select a remote IP address, and then we're going to type in our IP address for darkreading.com. So I click add, and then I type in the IP address that we found with the ping command. And you can even select a range of IP addresses if you like. But when I hit that, finish adding that in, we see that IP address added, 104.17.117.99. Okay? And now we're going to block the connection, and we're going to apply that to all profiles. I'm going to say dark reading block. Now, if you're not familiar with dark reading is a cybersecurity news site. It has a lot of good articles about cybersecurity and different trends within the field, different malware and malicious actors, what they're doing, different news articles, all about cybersecurity. So it's pretty good. I would definitely recommend taking a look at it if you have a chance, if you haven't done so already. Here's a image of the site so far. This is just, I loaded up the site just a moment ago. So that's what it looks like, and what we're going to try and do here is block access to that IP address that is being used for dark reading. Now, with dark reading, it's a cybersecurity site. I can almost guarantee they have more than one IP address associated with them. So let's take a look. We just connected to dark reading. Okay, and I just refreshed the page and it loaded again. Now that means we're probably getting that site through a different IP address. So let's take a look at our command line prompt and ping dark reading again. And what we should see here is that we'll get a different IP address that's pinged back to us. And most websites will have multiple IP addresses that can be associated with the site just to protect against denial of service attacks, or at least most popular websites. So ping darkreading.com. We didn't create a firewall rule for, we only created half of it. Hold on. We need an outbound rule. Let's do that real quick. Custom rule, scope, these IP addresses, add. 104.17.117.99. Block the connection. Okay, so now we've created our outbound rule. Let's go ahead and use our command line. And what we should see when I do the ping command is that we get a different IP address as a response. And yeah, we do. So 104.17.120.99 instead of 104.17.117.99. So let's try a range of IP addresses with dark reading, because I suspect that they have a range of IP addresses within this series here, okay, from the 117 to the 120. So let's make a range of IP addresses between 115 and 125 and see if we can block entire access to this site. So what we're going to do now is we're going to modify an existing rule, okay? And what I can do is I can do that a couple different ways. I can right-click on this rule and click properties. I can also go to the right here and click properties. It's the same type of shortcut. So I'm gonna hit properties, and I'm gonna find the scope, and then I'm gonna edit this, and I'm gonna select this IP range, okay? Let me get this. Okay. So I'm going to type in the range here. I know you can't quite see this. Oh, here you can. One moment. Okay. So instead of just this IP address or subnet, I'm going to select this. I'm going to go this IP address range. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to modify this value here. I'm going to modify this value here to be a range of IP addresses. So any range, any IP address that falls within that range, or any IP address that lies in between those two IP addresses to include those two IP addresses, will be blocked. So I hit OK, I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to do the same thing for the outbound rule. And if you have trouble finding, like if you've lost your rule or you can't find it, you can scroll down and you can search from different fields here. Okay. We can look at enabled. All of these are sortable fields. And if we select remote address, since most of these are any address, but the dark reading rule was specifically a remote IP address, when I sort through that field, I find it at the very top. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit properties. I'm going to go to scope, and I'm going to change the address here to this range. I'm going to paste the value I had before, modify that. So 115 to 125. Okay. And you see how this is listed. We have 117, which is listed as our first IP address, and then we have the range here listed like this: 104.17.115-99-104.17.125.99. Hit apply, and now that should make it so that we don't get a result from each of those IP addresses. And here we go. When we look at the command line and we ping darkreading.com, we get general failure, which seems to me that we were successful in our endeavor to block access. Now, if I go to Firefox, I try and refresh the page, Firefox is unable to connect to the site. Firefox can connect to other sites. It's connecting to Google just fine. If I search for dark reading, it finds dark reading just fine. But when I click on dark reading, it's unable to connect. And why is that? Because we've blocked the range of IP addresses that dark reading is using. So the computer is physically unable to connect to those IP addresses used by dark reading. So we used a combination of the ping command to find an IP address for a website, and then the Windows Defender Firewall combined to block access to that site after we determined what IP address that site was using. So that's just a practical way. Say you want to block access to a file sharing service, or like a torrent streaming site, or maybe a site you know has malicious code on it. Maybe like a file pirating site that you would suspect would have viruses or Trojan horses. This is a method you can use to find the IP addresses for those sites and then block them using Windows Firewall. There are much better ways to do this, or much easier ways to do this, and you should be able to find a list of malicious sites with IP addresses and load those rules into your firewall. But if you want to do it manually, this is a way that works. So, we've talked about how to block access to a program. We've talked about how to block access to a different IP address. And both of those are just very useful configuration settings that you can use with Windows Defender Firewall to just add a little bit of extra security. Knowing what sites are malicious, or knowing what programs you want to allow or deny on your computer, is a very useful function. It's a basic testable skill that you're going to see on the exam. So I hope this little demonstration helped you understand the basics of Windows Firewall and how it works, and how you can configure it to meet your needs or just block access to certain areas. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out, info@cybercrafttraining.com. If you want to see more demonstrations like this, please head over to the site, sign up to our email list. We do study sessions every week. And we have a Security Plus course. This type of firewall skill is going to be tested with that Security Plus test, CompTIA Security Plus certification, which is basically the best entry-level cybersecurity certification you can get. It covers a vast array of basic cybersecurity skills, and our Security Plus comprehensive course, which we host on our site, teaches you everything you need to know with 40 hours of content, so you can pass the exam, not only excel and ace the exam on the first attempt, but also learn what you need to excel in the workplace, to get that higher paying salary, get a good paying salary as a cybersecurity professional. And starting next week, we're going to run a special promotion on our Security Plus course. Normally it sells for $297, but we're selling it next week for 1 week only for $257. And we'll be sending out more information about that. If you want more information about Security Plus, please click the link in the description of this video. And thanks again for tuning in, for watching the study session. Again, if you have any questions, reach out using the link in the description. Hope you have a great day, and I hope this was very helpful.